Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? This is Dominic. I run Stream. We are the production company behind the DW Live show and have been since the beginning. And I think this is the first time I've ever had to do the intro completely by myself, knowing that I'm going to be by myself for the entire show. Neil is poorly. We play a poorly sound. We play a booing sound effect if we have one to hand. We should have been better prepared. But Neil is poorly, so please do send him your best wishes. I know he's watching at home, nervous because he's left me holding the baby, but I promise we'll take good care of it, that we'll get safely through this show. And Neil, from me to you, I wish you all the best for your recovery, and we look forward to having you back online with us very, very soon. So I'm afraid those of you watching, and we are live across all the social media channels that you would normally expect. So we are currently live on Facebook and we are live on Callan, remind me, YouTube. Thank you. We are not, however, today live on LinkedIn, and that's because LinkedIn doesn't appear to be playing ball. So if you were hoping to watch on LinkedIn, but you're watching this later on, I apologise that we didn't get to speak to you. Those of you watching on YouTube, and I know that Rahul and Naomi are already saying hello on YouTube. Those of you that are watching, please do say hi in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, and I will get to you during the show. I always try and say hello to as many people as possible, and Jeanette Lendon is the first person to jump in and say good afternoon. So good afternoon, Jeanette, and she's wishing you well, Neil. Hopefully you get to see that. We've got a great show coming up for you today. We've got Ken Kelling, who's going to be giving us a masterclass in getting your head straight, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. The great benefit to you of Neil not being here is that there's no witty banter and repartee. There are no comedy skits between the two of us. We're just going to get straight on with the content. However, before we do that, I do just want to point out that coming up this Thursday, there is a Boost Your Reputation with DW Superstars, which is a free webinar presented hopefully this week by Neil. Although if he's still poorly, I'm sure Di will step in and take over. But that is on Thursday the 15th at 1 p.m. You can register now at www.thedelegatewranglers.com/DW-broadcast. And in just a moment, we'll put that tiny graphic along the bottom of the screen so that you can get that link. But that's this Thursday at 1 o'clock with Neil, if he's okay. And if not, I would imagine it will be Di. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ken Kelling. Ken was on one of the shows way back right at the beginning of the DW Live show sometime last year. I can't remember when it was. I think it was probably April, May time last year. But he was one of the early ones, and I'm really glad to have him back. So let's move on. Ken, welcome back. Lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm really good, Dom. I'm really good. When you were talking about Neil, who I also send my best wishes to, I was just thinking about him being Ericsson watching from his hospital bed during the Euros or something like that. You know, somebody who really wanted to be on the pitch, but sadly due to injury is unable to do that. But
if this had happened a week earlier, I would have asked if it was a bug or he just had a football fever. But it doesn't seem appropriate to make those jokes now.
Yeah. Well, best wishes, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely. Best wishes. So, Ken, we're going to get straight on with it because we've got a load that we can talk about. You and I have had a brief chat just off air just then. And this is a subject that I'm really interested in personally and professionally. So I'm really interested to get on with it. For those of you watching at home, please do drop your hellos, drop your likes, drop your comments in the box below, whether you're on YouTube or on Facebook, and we will come to you. I've just seen that Swati Sharma said hello, so good afternoon to you, Swati. Ken, tell us briefly, give us a bit of a background to you. Tell us about you. What do you do?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, some people might be surprised that they know that the subject matter for today about coaching. But, you know, I've always had sort of a foot in two camps, really. I spent over 20 years now working in PR related to events. I was communications director at Visit London, now London and Partners, for some time, and we did a lot of work there on major events, trying to bring even more events into the capital in the UK. We set up a major events unit there, so that put me in touch with all sorts of event planners and professionals, everyone from the NFL in America, and that, you know, remember they brought games to Wembley during that time. That was amazing. Yeah. Through to all sorts of big kind of Tour de France events and other things. So I've always been interested in what events can do for destinations and for countries and for the economy and for jobs and everything else. And I always loved the energy and the buzz around the events industry. It was always so palpable there.
Yeah.
But I also got to work on quite a few events as well. So I worked on the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. On the
I'm already a little bit
Games.
envious.
Yeah. Well. When we're allowed to have a beer together, Dom, I'll tell you all the stories of that particular.
I would love
2
to.
years.
We could digress very easily here. I was one of the 2012 skeptics, and then as soon as you saw the opening ceremony, instantly wished that I was one of the games makers, or that I'd found a way to be involved in it in some way. So, and I've met a few people that were involved to varying degrees, but I'm always interested to hear how people got involved and what they did during it.
Yeah, well, my job on that was the torch relay in London.
Wow!
I had to plan bringing the torch relay around London for the 7 days leading up to the opening ceremony. And I remember almost on the first day, someone handed me a piece of paper and said, "Right, these are the 33 London boroughs. Take it through every single one of them, get it to the stadium, and don't piss anyone off." That was my brief.
I mean, as briefs go.
Yeah, it's simple. It's simple, but hugely complicated. I mean, that was unbelievable. 2 years working on something as huge as that, but really rewarding.
I can imagine.
But I was also involved in the sort of business tourism side of things.
Okay.
So I was a regular at shows like Convex and the Meeting Show and IBTM in Barcelona.
Yeah.
IMEX in Frankfurt. So Neil and I used to bump into each other when those shows were still going on. So business tourism was another big part of the career as well. But the switch to coaching kind of came about 6 years ago. I trained as a coach and was doing sort of both the event stuff and the coaching side by side for a while, and then eventually kind of flipped it into doing the coaching stuff purely on its own. And now I also train other coaches as well and supervise other coaches. So it's an amazing career to go.
Was it something that you fell into quite naturally, or did you make the decision to become a coach and then go for it, or was it something that just kind of happened and evolved out of other things that you were doing?
Yeah, well, what actually happened in sort of time scale was that, at the end of 2012 or the end of the Olympics, you're basically chucked out. It's like, thanks very much. You've been the centre of attention now. Yeah. Go away. Unless you're Seb Coe walking into some, kind of amazing job, the rest of us were like, okay, what do we do now? So I actually had a kind of time then where, I had to take some time off and I had a time of reflection. And it really was, what do I do now? And I'd always been a sort of a lot of people say this, but I always believed I was a great listener. And I started exploring coaching. Just sort of came into the back of my head as a little whisper, and I thought that's interesting. Yeah. And so I dug into that, and having space and time for reflection is incredibly important, Dom. And it's like it's the thing that we very rarely get under normal circumstances. But even in this, pandemic, as we might go on to chat about, this, when people have been on furlough or other things, there are some moments where we can just sort of, think things through, think maybe strategically about where we want to get to. What do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my career? Yeah. So it's really valuable to get those moments of reflection and thought, and that's basically what led me into coaching.
I think taking time out and getting those moments of reflection has been really important for me in the last year, particularly. I took myself off for a few days in October last year, I think it was. I just went away for a few days, and it came at a time where we had been extraordinarily busy for 5-6 months, and then we were going into a really, really busy period again leading up to Christmas. November was hellish in some ways, but I needed to take the time out just to recoup and regather thoughts and just make sure that everything was, all the ducks were in a row, ready for what was still to come. And taking that time out was hugely valuable. And I need to do it more frequently. I'm trying to do it more frequently, where you just take that step back and look at everything that you've done. And I think it's important to reflect on success and also some failures, but also then plan for how you're going to take things forward.
I completely agree. And I think, this is one of the fascinating things for me about working with people in the events industry in particular, is that, under normal circumstances, you don't always get that time.
No.
Because, I've had loads and loads of conversations with people who say, once you've done the event and you've ended on a high and it all went brilliantly well and successful, the next day you're on to the next thing, almost straight away. Or, so, that time and that pressure almost is nearly always there. And it's part of the reason I think why people, we talk about this industry being one of the most stressful, and that's part of it for me. Is like, wow, where do you get your time to think? Where do you get that? And as you say, it's incredibly valuable.
I think, for various reasons, last year was stressful across this industry and others, but in this industry that we work in. But it was stressful for different reasons for different people, right? Because from my side of things, and I've spoken about this on a podcast the last couple of days, I felt guilty about the fact that we were really busy when lots of my friends really weren't, and they were seeing business drop away from them. But I think equally, so I needed time to reflect on what we were doing and how we were going to deliver the work that we had. But equally, I think when you're in the situation where your business is suddenly disappearing under your feet and there's nothing you can do, taking yourself out of that situation and getting a time to reflect is as important. It doesn't just have to be when things are full on and busy.
Yeah, and when I'm working with people, for example, on getting more work-life balance, for example, into their week, that's absolutely one of the things that we program in. Is like, where's the time for yourself? And I think connected to that, though, Dom, I don't know what you think about this, has been kind of working at home.
Yeah.
Because I talk to people who will say, do you know what? Now I can go for a bike ride, for an hour.
Yeah.
And when I'm on the bike ride, I'll still be thinking about work, and I'll be working something out, and I'll be, and just because I'm not sitting at a desk in an office doesn't mean I'm not thinking and I'm not planning and I'm not doing stuff.
No, absolutely.
But, when you come back from that, you feel even better. You're like, great.
Absolutely. Those opportunities were invaluable, and we're all guilty, and I am particularly. I was walking for an hour every day like everybody else was, because you had nothing else to do. But we've come back to the office. We've been back at the office for a few months full time now. And you don't get that opportunity. You don't force yourself to say, oh, do you know what? I need to go for a walk. I'm at the office. I could very easily go for a walk where we are. It's beautiful, but I don't do it. And I don't know what it was. There was just something about being at home and being in the situation, perhaps because there was nothing else to do, where you forced yourself to go on a bike, go for your walk, whatever it was. But as you just said, reflecting on things, taking that opportunity to think about work, but not actually physically working.
Yeah, exactly, and and what we've learned, I think, through all of that is, that's just as valid. It's we've sort of moved away a little bit from almost like these industrial revolution ways of working, which is, you've got to be tied to a desk, you've got to be doing these hours, and you've got to be doing this, that, and the other. You've got to be seen on your email. You've got to respond to your emails really quickly. No, you don't. It's shown us a different way of approaching your lives or our lives, and I think that could be liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk specifically about coaching. Can you describe coaching? What is coaching to you? How do you describe it to people that are newbies to the coaching world, that have no idea really what you do?
Yeah, and it can be a very confusing picture out there. You can see people who describe themselves as business coaches, as life coaches, career coaches, executive coaches. If there's a subject matter, there's usually a coach attached to it. So there's a lot of people out there doing that. I think the first thing to think about, is a distinction between mentoring and coaching.
Yeah.
Because mentoring is very much about someone who's been in your shoes before, been there, done it, and is helping you to kind of get through a particular challenge or a particular qualification sometimes, a particular career change, and that person will bring their experience and their advice and their sage wisdom into that relationship. Coaching is less like that. Coaching is much more about believing that the answers to the challenge that you've got is inside you.
Yeah.
And so it's not about advising. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about holding a space for people so that they can get their own answers. And it sounds very easy and very simple, but it's actually quite a skill to hold the space in the right way, to ask the right kind of open questions, to be unattached, to not be judgmental, to not be stepping in with advice, as we like to do quite often. So it's about kind of allowing ourselves the idea that actually all you need is the space and the time and the right questions to come up with your own answers.
Interestingly then, what's the difference in that scenario between a coach and a counsellor? Because counsellors are largely kind of there to provide that space, to provide the ability for you to find the answers that are probably within you in the same way.
Yeah. If I put it very simply, and there might be loads of people who might disagree with me out there, but a simple way of looking at it is that counselling in general tends to be a little bit backward looking.
Okay.
So it might look at something that's happened in your past. It might look at something that is you're trying to deal with and that you need to fix or resolve in some kind of way. Coaching tends to be much more forward looking.
Okay.
So in coaching, you're really looking for, what's a future outcome that you would really like to get to? How would you like to change your life so it could be different in the future?
Okay.
And it also assumes in coaching that the person in front of you is what we call creative, resourceful, and whole. So there's nothing wrong with that person. There's nothing needs fixing. They just need a bit of mental unblocking or a little bit of space and time to work through what it is they'd like to achieve.
Okay.
And also what that's going to look like. So generally, that's the difference.
And what sort of people come to you? What challenges do they bring to you? Is it? I mean, do you focus specifically on events people, for example, or is it just a broad spectrum?
It's a fairly broad spectrum, but because as I was saying before, because my background is in events and PR, that tends to be my network. That tends to be the people who I know and work with. But the kinds of things that people might want to work on is something to do with their career. You might want a career change, something different. Job interviews was a big one in the last year or so. Kind of getting better and getting skilled at job interviews, because they can be really tricky when we're under pressure. Raising your profile, kind of doing more to kind of get out onto social media, or just raising that awareness of you and putting yourself out there. But also a bit of business planning sometimes. That someone is just looking to work through what they should do with a small business, for example. And a lot about organization and time management.
Okay.
That's always a big one. But
I mean, if I was going to knock on your door, Ken, that's probably the first thing I'd want to address.
Well, but interestingly though, Dom, that's the stuff that people come with.
Yeah.
What we actually end up talking about is the stuff that's below the surface. We talk about confidence, we talk about a sense of identity, we talk about purpose, meaning. So many people are always looking stuck, because quite often we know what we should be doing, but there's some reason that we're just not doing it. Sometimes we can't see it, and sometimes we just need a bit of help to kind of get ourselves unstuck.
Do you find common themes running between people when you're talking to them about this? What, in terms of what's holding them back? Is it a common set of issues that people are finding themselves stuck with, or is it really broad?
I think you could probably say two or three things that are at the core of everything, Dom. To be honest, and again, I might get into trouble with all the psychologists for boiling this down. But I'm a simple guy, as you'll discover. Confidence is so much at the heart of everything.
Yeah.
And belief is so much at the heart of everything. and meaning is at the heart of everything. Because when you look at sort of hugely successful people, or in any sphere, they've nearly always got those three things. They've got a belief in what they do. They've got a purpose and meaning behind what they want to achieve and do, and that gives them the confidence to go out and do the tough stuff and do what it is that they want to do, and become quite single-minded.
So I guess knowing that it's kind of focused around those three things of confidence, belief and meaning, does that mean then that you're able to, do the coaching sessions follow a structure? How do you approach it?
It's always about, you never come to a coaching session. Well, I don't come to a coaching session with any assumptions.
Yeah.
So it'll absolutely be what do you want to talk about today? And how do you want to use this time? Because even if I had a coaching session with someone before, so much can change in between times. Because we work on stuff in our own minds all the time. So what was true, or what was perhaps a concern 2 weeks ago, is not necessarily the same concern the following 2 weeks after.
Yeah. Because
we'll have worked on stuff, we'll have thought it through, and quite often, you might have been really, kind of thinking, oh my God, this is a real challenge for someone 2 weeks ago, and they'll turn up and they'll say, nah, I'm not bothered about that anymore. Now it's about this. So, it's always about what's front of mind for you right now at this present time.
And I'm guessing there is an element of accountability in someone coming to you too.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's two things related. I think one is just speaking stuff out loud sometimes can be incredibly powerful, and bringing what's going on in our heads, bringing that to the surface and speaking it. So quite often you'll see a lot of coaches will be saying very little, because actually as the person talks, they're kind of figuring stuff out for themselves. It's amazing. So speaking out loud, and then absolutely coming up with your own actions and telling someone this is what you're going to do. Absolutely, it can be way better than just having a to-do list written down on a piece of paper, because you've said it out loud, you've said it to someone, and you're going to see them again in a couple of weeks' time. So absolutely.
I mean, I know personally, I've probably operated better before COVID hit and before the world went awful. I used to meet a couple of friends once a week or once every couple of weeks, and we would just kind of go through things that we had set as our own personal or professional goals for the short term. So it was very much a short-term accountability session, and it's probably the time that I've operated best in my business, is when I knew that I was going to go to that breakfast meeting on a Tuesday or every other Tuesday, knowing that I had to let them know or update them on what it was that I'd done over the last week or two since we'd last met, and how I'd managed to move things on. So I totally get the importance of that, and I think the combination of writing things down, which globally known to be to help you achieve goals a lot better, but also speaking them out loud with someone who's going to question why you did what you did, perhaps, is hugely important, and has been hugely valuable for me in the past. So it's definitely something that I need to kind of drag myself back into doing.
Yeah, and I think the coaching approach is not to kind of hold you like some kind of judge or some kind of teacher or some kind of boss. Yeah, it's simply to get you to say what you want to commit to. It's not up to me. It's like, what do you want to commit to, and if it doesn't happen, there's no judgment there. It's okay. Well, let's look at what happened there, and what you'd like to do about it, and what got you stuck, or why didn't it shift. So you can actually progress positively and move on from that, rather than feeling guilt or being told off, because that's certainly never happened.
I'm just going to break for a minute and just say hi to a couple of people. I can see that Jill and Gail are having a little conversation amongst themselves on Facebook at the moment. I think there's they obviously know each other from elsewhere. If you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Facebook live with us, we are with Ken Kelling, talking about getting your head straight. It's a masterclass in coaching, and we're going to come straight back to that now. So Ken, People that are watching at home who are starting to get an idea and an understanding of what coaching is and potentially how that would help them, are there kind of any tips, hints, tricks that you can give them to maybe go find their own coach or what they should be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were saying before, there are plenty of coaches out there. I think several things. Number one, it's a good idea to look at some kind of credential.
Okay.
Is the person accredited with something like the International Coach Federation or the Association for Coaching? There are two or three professional bodies that will give accreditations to people, and that means that you've reached a certain standard in your coaching, that you've been assessed on that, you've been tested on that, and you've got a certain number of coaching hours behind you. Yeah. So there's definitely some help with that. But it's not every coach that's got that, Dom. You don't have to have a coach, but if you're starting from scratch and just looking out there, it's a good benchmark.
Yeah.
Recommendations are always good. Who's worked with someone, what was that like? Ask them about their experience. What was the approach? How did that work? What did they get from it? So definitely word of mouth, testimonials, and recommendations are really powerful.
Yeah.
And then make sure you have a conversation with them, because you are eventually going to have lots and lots of conversations with this person. So get off at some point, get off the email, get off the website, get off the everything else, and
actually pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone, or most coaches, myself included, and I'll be offering this a bit later. We'll offer some kind of free coaching, or a conversation to because there's this thing called fit, Dom. That's it's a really difficult one to pin down, and you don't really get an idea of whether you fit each other until you've had a conversation, until you know what that's like. So all of those things are professional accreditations, recommendations, and actually having a conversation will start you down that track.
I think those conversations are so important, because you're going to be opening up potentially some quite personal or confidential information, and you've got to feel comfortable with that person. And again, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, a counselor, anyone in those three brackets, you've got to feel some kind of personal connection to, I think, in some ways. I know I certainly would.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big thing called rapport, and if there's no rapport there, you're not going to work together. And the other thing is that rapport is, again, it's like fit. It's a hard thing to pin down, and it's no judgment if you feel that this person isn't quite right for you, or you're not quite right for them. There's no judgment in that. It's about just finding what's going to work best for you. So
see, that's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. Is that my immediate thought was, is this coach right for me? But actually, from your perspective as a coach, do you find yourself in the position where you can identify quite quickly that you're not the right coach for that person?
Absolutely, yeah. That happens, and that comes from the best intentions and the best interests of both people. So it's really not a judgment at all. It's simply
and beyond. Does that go beyond rapport and fit, as you just said? Is that just potentially because someone's coming to you with a challenge that you're not the right person to help solve?
It can be that. It could be something about your background. There's a lot of coaches work in the industries that they used to work in for a very good reason, which is when someone comes from that network and is talking about industry stuff or something specific to their job, it's sometimes nice to know that the person on the other side of the Zoom call, perhaps, actually understands what you're talking about and actually gets what it is. So you'll see a lot of coaches who will tie themselves specifically to an industry or something that people can then think, yeah, they'll get it. I'll have a chat with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you just said something that I'll pick up on, is the fact that you can do this in the virtual world, and that's actually how you've been operating. You said to me off air just before we started that you moved over to it and you went virtual the same as everybody else. But this doesn't have to be done face to face. And perhaps the last year has shown and proven that it doesn't have to be done face to face.
Yeah, in the coaching world, the sort of the pandemic brought all of this stuff about, oh, you need to be face to face with people to coach them. You need to have that kind of atmosphere together. But what people have found, like a lot of other things, is that actually you can do these things virtually, and there's a huge amount of benefit to that. There's a huge amount of benefit to time that you spend. There's all sorts of benefits, and actually, if going back to these words, if the fit and the rapport and everything else feels right, then that will communicate itself through the screen. And because we become so used to kind of seeing people in their homes and all the rest of it, that we worry about it a lot.
We've all opened our homes up to strangers in the last year.
Yeah, indeed.
It was a really nice comment that came in while we were talking just then from Jack Sayward. Afternoon, Jack. Nice to see you watching. It says, Ken, great words explaining the difference between coaching and mentoring. Many still get the two confused. And I would hope that the answer that you gave a short time ago will certainly try to remove some of that confusion. But thanks for commenting that, Jack. But he then followed it up and said, fit is another great explanation. If you don't get fit, don't dismiss it as the right fit is great experience for any professional or student. In my early career, it took 3 attempts before I found the right fit. I'd always advocate for someone giving it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And these things, these things always come from conversations, and that's why I was kind of really keen on pushing this conversation idea, because you can't get that from a website, you can't get that from an email. You can use all sorts of words and explanations, but at the end of the day, coaching is about 2 human beings, and those 2 human beings have to be able to relate to each other.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. I'm just going to see, just while we're talking, I'm just trying to see if there's any other. Callum whispered in my ear there are a couple of questions. I don't know if he saw something that I haven't. Okay, thank you. Bear with me. Let me have a look. Okay, so Rahul, this is coming from YouTube. Sorry for the pause. So I'm only watching Facebook, and Callum, who's pushing the buttons in the background, is watching YouTube. So we've just got a couple of questions come in. So from Rahul, who we knew was watching, we said hi to. How can we expose skills in other? Hang on. How can we expose skills in other areas? That's our hobby. I need to reread that, bear with me. So actually, I'll tell you what, I'll ask this question first. This one's from Naomi Rose. Good afternoon, Naomi. I know, Ken, you've interviewed Naomi, you said earlier.
Hey, Naomi, how are you?
How important is it for next generation event professionals to have a coach in their early stages of their career? That's a great question.
It really is, absolutely. Well, in an ideal world, everybody would have a coach, absolutely. But I will go back to that kind of that mentor versus coaching distinction, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a judgment for yourself, where you would like to get support, and a mentoring approach is going to be a little bit more kind of guiding, a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more advice giving, and a little bit kind of more about options, suggestions, and why don't you do it like this? And perhaps in the early stages of people's careers, they might need a bit of that, because they haven't had as much experience. So actually, getting someone to tell them what to do effectively or to make suggestions can be really helpful. We've seen the success of the Fast Forward mentoring scheme, Faye Sharp's mentoring scheme, for example, and one or two others in the industry that have really, really put mentoring front and center of particularly young people's journeys. That doesn't mean to say you can't have a coach as well, but perhaps, just generally speaking, perhaps mentoring is a little bit more the option to take at an early stage of your career. As you go on, maybe the coaching becomes more relevant because you've got your own experience to draw on and talk about.
I'm really interested to know, because obviously Naomi's asked that question. Naomi, can you stick a comment in the chat and let us know, have you got a coach? Do you use coaching? Because I know you're still would be classed as being early stages of your event career. Do you use a coach? And actually anyone else out there that is using a coach, perhaps you can explain how long you've used them and why you first started using a coach, because I find this whole subject really important, really interesting. I know we're going to talk about it again in a minute, but resilience is another fascinating subject that's kind of encompassed in this whole area. I'm just going to go back to Rahul's question. Rahul, I'm really sorry. I don't fully understand the question, I don't think, but I'm going to have a go. I think he's essentially asking how we can expose skills in other areas of our lives, for example, including our hobbies. Many people are working 18 to 22 hours, but only on office work, and they have less time to manage health and pull out those skills from their hobbies. So how can we coach people to kind of balance that and bring out those areas?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's a really great question, and I think it's become, really relevant in the last 16 months or so, because, back to our early point of reflection and time, it is also an opportunity to look at, what we call transferable skills. So, in most of the time when we're in our sort of jobs and really, really, really busy and getting our careers going, it's really easy to think in quite a tunnel way, and it's really easy to think of, I'm experienced in this project management and I'm experienced in this type of event management. What's sometimes harder, and this is where coaching can certainly come in, is to sort of be more objective about ourselves and actually say, do you know what? I'm a working mum, for example. Yeah. I balance childcare with a part-time job and, feeding 4 people and all the rest of it. And the project management skills of working mums is quite extraordinary. And, but we never ever think in that way. Yeah. We don't kind of think that. We think it has to be some, CV driven thing that nobody's going to pay any attention to, and unless it's got X years in doing this, that, and the other. Yeah. I remember when I used to be a sort of manager and a director of people, I was always really interested in people who had sort of different skills. It sometimes takes a bit of an enlightened employer to kind of recognize this stuff. But it's really important that you get on top of those, and that sometimes means you have to think objectively. You have to get rid of this voice that says, "Oh, I'm not experienced enough in X, Y, Z," or I haven't done enough of that, and I haven't done, because you just go down a rabbit hole of talking yourself down. But getting someone to help you work out from an objective point of view, what are the actual skills, both life skills and work skills, and how do they make you the whole person that you are that anyone would want to employ.
Interesting. Naomi has also just come back and said, hi, Dom and Ken. Yes, I have a coach and 2 mentors. Coach and 2 mentors. One is in corporate events and the other is in AI technology. Great session. Thanks. That's really interesting to take the approach of having 2 mentors, and it makes absolute sense based on what you said earlier on. Just going back to what you were just saying, the project manager of working mums, or mums in general, actually, I'm totally with you. I'm in awe of people that are juggling that. I've got my children for a week starting on Thursday while their mum's away, and I'm already trying to work out how the hell I'm going to manage everything, but I'm absolutely not going to complain because she does it a far better job than I for far longer periods than I do.
Don't go for a spreadsheet, Dom. That's all my advice. Don't go for a spreadsheet.
That would be my natural go-to though, Ken.
I know, I guessed it.
There's another comment coming just on YouTube from Hannah B. Good afternoon, Hannah. Thank you very much for watching. It says, I'm very much not in the early years of my career, 20 plus years, but have recently started with a coach and find it fascinating. Opportunity to undo the bad habits I've picked up over the years. And this is a really interesting one. You can teach an old dog new tricks, right? And Hannah, that's not aimed at you, but I would take that on myself. I have a ton of bad habits in terms of time management or getting distracted or just general things other things that I could be doing. It's really interesting that someone who's 20 plus years has taken on a coach and is finding the ability to unpick those bad habits.
Absolutely. I love that. And well done, Hannah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because almost the reverse thing that we tend to have with a lot more experience is we tend to have formulated these things that are beliefs.
Yeah.
And very often they are beliefs, they're not truths.
Yeah.
And they're just things that over the years we've told ourselves, they've become cemented, they've become things that, oh yes, and they can be as simple, Dom, as things like, I'm not very good at X, or I haven't got enough experience in Y, or I'm not good enough. If I had a pound for every time that phrase "not good enough" has come up in a coaching session, I'd be richer than I am now. But it's these things that really get cemented in us, and it's only until you start kind of working with a coach or someone to start unpicking these that you realize they've been driving your life. They've been driving you for years, and they might well extend back to childhood. They might extend to all sorts of things. Because when we're kids, we're so impressionable. One thing that a teacher says to us that we take negatively can therefore be a truth for the rest of our lives.
I think that's true in general anyway, isn't it? I think you just get that one comment, rightly or wrongly, you get one comment from one person that can just sit in the back of your mind for years, and can be all consuming, can define certain things at work or at home that then prove to be a problem later on. But I love that people like Hannah are 20 years into her career taking the opportunity to take that step back and reflect and say, actually no, I think this can be fixed and I can undo those bad habits, so let's have a go at doing so.
Absolutely. And it's also I think coupled with this idea that I was talking about earlier, that again, as we kind of get our careers under our belt, we also start looking a little bit more for kind of meaning and purpose and things that are fulfilling. And quite often we might end up in jobs or careers or other things where we think, I either don't want to do this anymore, or quite often I've never wanted to do this. I fell into it, and I don't really know why I'm here or how I got here. And I want something more meanoful, and we have, I think, a greater sense as we progress. We have a greater sense of what that is because we've tried out a lot of stuff. So coaching for someone who's 20 years plus can be incredibly powerful from that point of view, really helping to find meaning and purpose as well as career stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. A subject that you and I spoke briefly about before we started the show was resilience. And I think I'm fascinated by the subject of resilience, and I'm fascinated it from the perspective of being a small business owner in general, regardless of anything that's happened in the last 14, 16 months. I'm just fascinated by resilience as a small business in small business owners. But I think particularly among the event industry and event professional community, resilience has been a word that I've heard pop up quite a lot in that time. Let's talk briefly about that. Can you see resilience in people in a whole different way to what I would and what I would experience? So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, like we were chatting off air, I think people who work in the events industry, under pre-pandemic times, they were and are incredibly resilient. Event management is not for the faint-hearted. It's kind of it's pressurized, it's time-driven, it's all sorts of stuff. And I often get the impression that as events people, we sort of get half pressure and half thrill out of what we do, and there's always a balance between those two things. But there are moments where we're called upon, I think, both as an industry and as people, to dig even deeper. And the last 16 months has been evidence of that, both from the point of view of work and organizations, but also personally. And I hear and speak to a lot more people about personal resilience than I ever did before, because it's for me, resilience is about learning. It's about learning. It's about something failing. What can I learn from it? Or something didn't go so well. What can I learn from it? Something did go really well. How can we take that forward? So a big part of resilience, I think, is about learning. A big part of resilience is about confidence and being confident in who we are. And it's a big part about being optimistic and future looking.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when we're in the middle of something and it feels really crappy, it's hard to think, well, is it going to be the same in 2-3 years' time?
Yeah.
Probably not. So actually, what does that mean for me? So how do I dig into that idea and think about something for 2 or 3 years' time and then start to work on that?
But I think if you just take yourself back to March, April last year, when the world changed quite considerably, I think the ability to look 2-3 years ahead would be almost impossible
really
at that
hard.
moment.
Yeah, really hard.
But the resilience in the small business owners, the event professionals, the event community in general, to wake up on the 24th of March and find a way to carry on, or still be finding ways to continue and generate income, whether that was, as you said earlier, whether it was to go and work for the water board or for one of the supermarkets, just finding any way to keep going for that moment, knowing that fundamentally it was never going to be a permanent change to the world, and the events industry would come back at some stage. But just finding that energy to get up and find a way to continue was really difficult for the vast majority of people in this community, the Delegate Wranglers, and beyond.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to on this subject, I wanted to kind of plug a book if I can, which is not my book at all, Dom, which is very rare for this kind of conversation. It's actually a book by Dr. Susan Kahn, and it's called Bounce Back.
We will. I will just jump in on this, Ken, and then we'll come back to it. Neil always does a wrap up at the end of the show where we put useful links and stuff. I will make sure that he's got an image of that book or a link to it so that we can get it out for people later on. And I'll also get Callum to take a screenshot so that I can get this book ordered, because it's something that I'd quite like to read. Can you just hold it up again for us?
Yeah, sure.
So we got Bounce Back, How to Fail Fast and Be Resilient at Work by Dr. Susan Kahn. Is this a book that you recommend to people that you are coaching?
Yeah, I do actually, because and the reason that I like it is because Susan Kahn, she is an academic.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff will be based on research, but she writes in a really clear, concise, and interesting way. And there's also a few exercises and some other bits and pieces in there. So I think it's just really accessible, Dom. And I think that kind of book is a rarity. I think something that's both kind of serious, but also easy to read. So I found that book really helpful. And
is it one that you can go back to and kind of repeat read?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And you can take out different exercises and just have a go at them, and whatever's going on in your life, refer back to it, because in coaching we kind of talk about doing the work, and doing the work on ourselves is about self-development and all the rest of it. So I think it's quite a good aid to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely go away and get that book, because, again, more so because I'm fascinated by the subject. I find it really interesting, and I find the ability for people to fail and get back up the next day and go try again and learn and fix things really interesting. But actually something that I hadn't considered properly, I don't think, until you spoke just now, was the ability to learn from success, which is something that completely by accident I found us doing as a business a few weeks ago. But we had an event that went really successfully, which the majority of us do, but we just changed a few things in the lead up to that, and it meant that the whole thing was just really, really smooth experience for us and for the client and for the people at home watching. And we came away from that learning a huge amount from it, to take us forward and help navigate us through future events that we do. So learning from success as part of the resilience subject, I think, I'm totally bought in there.
Good, yeah. It's a fun. There is a thing that, and this was something that I didn't necessarily think about that much either. There's also a sort of flip side, which is a fear of success. So sometimes we can be quite stuck or blocked on something, and we think there's something wrong, or we kind of, and then underneath it might be this idea that actually, God, what if I'm successful? What if I'm successful? And then there'll be a whole heap of stuff coming my way, and and that can be just as debilitating sometimes as anything else. So it's fascinating.
I think there's two parts for that. I think there is absolutely that that fear of success, and that, wow, what happens if we are successful or we do well at that. And I think that's also a little bit linked to imposter syndrome. You can feel like you're not the right person to be doing this, or you don't deserve it, or you don't have the knowledge, experience, or whatever it is to be doing what you're doing and succeeding at the same time. And I certainly felt that last year. And I know a ton of people from this community that have probably felt the same.
Yeah, there's been in the last 20 years or so, there's been quite a lot of research and studies and stuff around positive psychology.
Yeah.
And you start to see that in articles and all sorts of stuff out there, which is where you kind of see things like gratitude and kindness and all these other things that kind of have been shown and proven that they make us feel better and they make us happier. So sometimes these things fall into cliche, but there is a decent amount of evidence that says, actually all these positive things, they do make us feel better. So we know a lot more these days about what actually makes us happy. We don't always do the things that make us happy, but we know a lot more about, what does make us happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken, this has been fascinating. I've loved this conversation. We're getting close to the point that we need to kind of wrap it up. Have you got any final comments, hints, tips, tricks that you'd just like to pass on to those that are watching on YouTube and on Facebook?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I was hoping I might get in. A couple of kind of tips, and one is just one thing that's just came up for me, Dom, and I hope you'll allow me to share this.
Please.
When I said showing kindness. Even one act of kindness a day can make us feel better. So I'm now wondering, it just came into my head, I'm going to send Neil a nice kind of get well online card straight after this, and maybe if all of the people who are watching just kind of do that, one act of kindness, let's send Neil a nice get well card online, then he'll feel better and we'll feel better and all the rest of it. But that's just one thing.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
But the kindness and gratitude, I think the choosing happy, right? You choose to be happy, and taking steps to make sure that you are always happy and living a happy, successful, positive life is really important. But I'll send Neil good wishes. I've sent him a message anyway. But yeah, if you happen to feel the urge, send Neil a nice little online card. That'd be lovely.
I love it. He won't know what to do with them all. But anyway, one thing we haven't touched on just very quickly, Dom, and I think it's been really important in the last year and comes up time and time again, I think, in some of my coaching work is the idea of a sense of control. Yeah. Because everything has been felt so much out of our control, and that's a real source of frustration sometimes. The kind of complexity of life, the things that are just we can't do anything about. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever seen this. I told you I was a simple guy. This little model here, which you can do at any time you're feeling like stuff isn't in your control. And what you do is in the middle here, in the biggest circle, you write everything that's in your control. Yeah. And the outside ring, you write everything that's in your influence. And everything that's not in your control, you just shove to the four corners. Just stick them out there. Yeah. So the economy, the pandemic, Boris Johnson, whatever it is you want to put in there that you're finding frustrating, stick all that stuff out into the corners and make that middle circle. What's actually in my control? What can I actually do? And I just think it's such a simple thing to do that anybody can do it, whether that's to do with their life, their career, or just something that's going on for them that day. I think it's very powerful.
I love that little exercise, and you know what? I'm hoping we're closing the business for a couple of weeks in August because it just seems a good time to give everyone a break because we work so hard. But exercises like that I find really useful and really interesting. There's another one. There's a series of books from the Do Book Company, and one of those books is a book called Do Breathe, which is again one that you can just kind of go back to. There's a few exercises in it, and they talk about decluttering your mind and decluttering your desktop and everything. But one of the things that I did a few years ago, last year when I went away, was writing down all of the things, all of the thoughts that came into my head. I wrote them down on a piece of paper, and actually in doing doing that, immediately you can just find this weight lifted off you, because you suddenly realize that there are so many things that you think about in a day that you either can't control or can't influence, and therefore you can't do anything about. So why are you spending time thinking about them? And actually, when you start narrowing it down, it's probably a slightly different take on a similar exercise, but when you start narrowing them down, you get to the things that you can control, you get to the things that you can influence. And I then started prioritizing them and saying, okay, fine, that one for me, if I can get rid of that because I can control it or I can influence it, I can get rid of it by taking some form of action, I can pass that off. And immediately, just over the few days that I was away, you just feel this weight lifting from you. And I think it's really useful exercise, and I don't do it enough. I really don't do it enough.
Beautiful. Yeah, we have something like, I read somewhere, we have something like 30,000 thoughts a day or something crazy.
It was a big notepad, Ken.
Well, 30,000 people for the average person, Dom. I don't know where you fit into that, but maybe it's twice as much, maybe it's half. I don't know.
I don't know. Let's just say average.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that there are a couple more things. Do you have anything else that you want to throw in?
Yeah, just a very quick one, and this is to do with goal setting. Again, there's a wonderful coach called Michael Bungay, rather marvelously named Michael Bungay, and I watched something that he did the other day about having a worthy, ambitious goal, and I loved what he said, because for me it's sort of we can get a little bit too in the minutiae of goal setting. Yeah. And I loved what he had to say about kind of just being big and ambitious. And he said, always have a goal that you feel is thrilling, important, and daunting. And I love that. I love that idea. I love that idea. So, because sometimes we don't think in an ambitious enough way, you know. So make sure your big goal is thrilling, important, and daunting. And there was also an implication in there of, you know, if you've got a goal, make it a goal for other people as well, because that's what's going to motivate you. You know, we can make goals for ourselves about careers and everything else, but we're only going to get really motivated and feel purposeful and meaningful, you know, if there's something important about that goal. What is it that we want to do? So I just love that idea, and I thought I'd share that as a simple thing today.
I love that, and I remember reading, I don't know who said it, you may, but someone said your goal isn't big enough if it doesn't scare you.
Exactly.
But it's exactly the same sort of thing. But thrilling, important, and daunting, I love that. And again, I'll take that away and apply that to some things that I do for the business and personally as well.
Great.
Wonderful. Ken, sorry, just go
on. No, I wanted to just repeat what I was saying earlier about, I think in the follow-up stuff, you know, if anyone from today, you know, any delegate wrangler wants a conversation for 45 minutes or an hour with me, just to sort of, you know, have a look at something that they would like to kind of bring to a coaching space, I'm more than happy to do that, but we'll put that in the follow-up stuff. So
absolutely, it's a really kind offer, and if you are out there watching, there are enough people out there watching that have stayed interested to watch all the way through, which is really lovely. Please take Ken up on the offer, because I think this conversation has really opened my eyes as to the potential of coaching, and I already understood a little bit about what it was, but I think it's probably a conversation that you and I will have, Ken, when we finish with this. I'm very, very conscious of time. We've got a few more bits. Ken, thank you so much for doing this, especially knowing that Neil wasn't going to be here. You stuck with it anyway. I really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating hour for me, and I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you.
No, thank you, Tom. It's been fun.
It has, very much so. Ken, I'll catch up with you offline after this, but for now I'm going to move on. So thank you very much. We need to move on. It is 2:33. We've got a couple more things to do very briefly. The first thing up is every week, or most weeks, we have a lowdown look from Martin Fullard at Mash Media. He has very kindly produced another video for us. So Callum, if we can push that button, here is Martin.
Hello and welcome to the Delegate Wranglers Weekly Lowdown with Mash Media. I'm Martin Fullard. Now, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is expected to confirm Freedom Day today on the 12th of July, which, if all goes to plan, means that from the 19th of July, all restrictions will be lifted and events will be able to run like they were in the good old days. However, while there is no legal requirement for things like COVID status certification and face coverings, individual event organisers are being encouraged to risk assess themselves and introduce whichever measures they feel are suitable for their audience. Hopefully, the government will be updating their guidance this week before that 19th of July Freedom Day. More information, of course, can be found on Conference News. Now, a new scholarship is currently being put together, which aims to improve diversity in the events industry. The scholarship is called REACH, which stands for Race, Ethnicity and Cultural Heritage, and it's going to be launched officially later this year, most likely at International Confex, so do stay tuned. It's being put together by a task force comprising the Hub, Diversity Ally, Event First Steps, MASH Media, and of course, Manchester Metropolitan University. Each student from an ethnic minority background will need their course covered annually to the tune of about £27,000. And MASH Media Managing Director Julian Agostini has already pledged £3 for every visitor who comes to Confex this September. Larger businesses are also being encouraged to pledge £5,000 per year to cover the placements, which we're hoping to get started in 2022. Of course, if you can't afford it this year, and we understand many businesses are in trouble at the moment, then of course don't worry, because this will be a rolling thing every year, and it really is a tangible, positive step to change the way we look at diversity in the events industry. And that is your weekly lowdown.
Thank you so much for doing that again, Marty. Really, really appreciated. We love seeing the lowdowns each week, or certainly when you can do them. So very much appreciated. I'm going to do a quick shout to the sponsor, Events Case, who I know Neil is using for all registration for DW Live, for the webinars, for the introductory sessions that he does for the group. So massive thanks to Events Case and to my team, Ed and Callum in the background, without whom this show production-wise wouldn't be possible. That's it from me. I'm just going to do a very quick look forward to the things that are coming up. So Callum, if we can have that graphic. This Thursday is the Boost Your Reputation with DW Superstars webinar with Neil if he's well and Di if he's not. Next Tuesday we have a brilliant session and it's the final one for this series of DW Live. It's the press release masterclass with Martin Fullard from Conference News, and then on Thursday 5th of August DW Onboarding with a new members webinar with Diane. So there's a few things coming up. As I said, next week is our last show for this season, and then we're going to be coming back, all being well. The first show of the next season is going to be coming live from Confex. But for now, we've kept you far too long. I really, really appreciate you sticking with us, for watching to the end. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with you next week, hopefully with Neil sitting that side of me. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.